Hello, friends, and welcome to another exciting episode of Today with Tally. The mission and goal of this podcast is to bring an engaging conversation that will add value to the lives of everyday people. We will inspire, encourage, educate, and tell the stories of America's finest men and women in an effort to motivate you to live your life to its fullest potential. Be sure to follow us on social media and search Today with Tally. Be sure to subscribe, follow, and share the program as well. Ladies and gentlemen, your host of the evening, Mr. Brian Tally.
Welcome back to Today with Tally podcast, where we have real life value to the lives of everyday people. We were on YouTube, Spotify, Amazon Music, iHeartRadio, Google Podcasts, Twitter, Facebook, and About Face Radio. Simply search Today with Tally and be sure to like, share, and subscribe to get every episode and stay up to date with the latest and greatest our guests in this show has to offer. Folks, today's show sponsor is author John Henley. Now, John is a respected best-selling author who served in the U.S. Navy on submarines and then went on to serve as an officer of the CIA. He is now living out his dream as an author and is giving back to the community he cares deeply about. If you are an aspiring author and need a mentor, or perhaps you want to collaborate with the best-selling author, then contact author John Henley today. John has developed a unique program that specializes in helping military veteran authors get recognized and get you the exposure you need to be a successful author. John believes that writing, creating, and using your own imagination and putting a book together is a healthy way to deal with post-traumatic stress and is a wonderful coping strategy to occupy your mind, body, and spirit while surrounding yourself with a positive and meaningful hobby. Contact author John Henley today, and he can give you that final push and encouragement to reach your goals. Visit authorjohnhenley.com. That's authorjohnhenley.com and select your story and follow the prompts. Folks, today we have a very special guest on our program. We are going to be joined by Jean Sampson. Now, Jean is a caretaker of her uncle who served in heavy combat operations in Vietnam. She is also a veteran advocate, and she is also a former city council member in the town that she is from in Oregon. And with that, we are honored to be joined by Jean this morning. How are you?
Doing well. Thank you for having me.
The pleasure is all mine. The pleasure is all mine. Sincerely, I know, you and your family have been through some hardship over the last several decades when it comes to the care that your uncle hasn't received, if you will, and it's kind of changed your life forever. You know, you wanted to come on, you wanted to talk to, to a veteran community, a veteran population, and perhaps add some real life value out there on how we can perhaps eliminate these types of instances moving forward through your hardship and through hardship and the horror stories that you and your uncle and your family have had to go through over the years.
Definitely. Yes. If I can save any family from going through what we have and continue to go through, I will be thrilled, because I wouldn't wish this on anybody.
So your uncle served in Vietnam, and he would end up coming home at 22 years old, correct?
Mm-hmm. Yes, he was 22.
And when he got home, he ended up having a stroke, right? That was pretty much from the post-traumatic stress that that he went through. And at the time, coming back from war, 1968, 69, 70, 71, nobody knew what post-traumatic stress was. So it was obviously a combat-related injury due to the stresses of war that ended up causing his stroke, correct?
Correct. Yes. None of us had any indication at all that he was under any kind of stress or having any sort of issues. He was very quiet about it. My grandma said during his entire service in Vietnam, you would have sworn he was at Club Med because he made it sound wonderful in his letters so as not to worry them. And when he came home, he did the same thing.
Yeah, that's very, a lot of military service members don't want to scare their family, so they always
No.
kind of make it feel as if, hey, look, I'm fine. Don't worry about me. But, it's not always the person that's serving overseas and, in combat operations. Those guys aren't worried about anything. It's the people back home, all the aunts, the uncles, the moms, the dads, anybody who loves that person. Those are the ones that are worried sick. So it's always good to have that, that reassurance that, hey guys, look, I'm fine, when really things may not be as
may not be fine. So yes, when he came back at 22, he did end up shortly thereafter having a stroke that caused him to be epileptic and weakened on one side, but it did not slow him down. As soon as he recovered and got stronger, he moved to Alaska, had a full life, was married, had 2 sons, and worked on the big fish processing boats up in Alaska on the refrigeration unit. So he did not let it slow him down in the least.
So the stroke, it left him in epileptic, but he would go on and he would live a successful and joyous life until the age of 45. And at 45, everything would come to a screeching halt and his life would forever be changed.
Yes. He was actually working on an elderly woman's patio, doing some work for a friend of his, and had a seizure while he was driving home at lunch. He ended up hitting the back of a flatbed truck, and the impact of it broke one rib, but it made his brain hit his skull, causing his brain to swell traumatically. And they said it was similar to a shaken baby syndrome. So they did not have facilities strong enough to even care for him in Alaska. So he was put on a life flight and brought down to the VA in Seattle into their trauma unit. And they worked to save his life. And he stayed there for several months.
What was the treatment like on that initial VA stay when he was injured from that car accident?
I have to say, in the Seattle VA, he got exceptional care. And my grandparents drove 3 hours each way every day to be with him. And we had no complaints about the service that he received there, and the care and the people. They were exceptionally good to my grandparents and to my uncle while he stayed there.
Now, I know we're going to get into the VA here because that's what this show is about today with you. It looks like at first he received good care that would ultimately save his life. He was there for months.
He was.
And then things started to fall apart after that because he was left permanently injured at that point, correct?
Yes, he had a permanent traumatic brain injury that was very significant. He would never be able to live independently again or really do anything for himself again. And we knew that was the road that we were going to be on. We actually just passed the 31-year mark a few days ago of the anniversary of that accident. So he was then transferred down to a care facility closer to our home in Oregon, and was only there for a few months because it wasn't a VA-related nursing home. A new VA nursing home had just opened in Vancouver, Washington, and that's where he was transferred. And even though he had the brain injury, he was able to sit up fairly well in a wheelchair. He was able to communicate a little bit with us. He wasn't completely incapacitated. He was still interactive with us. He could speak a little bit, not a lot, but we really had high hopes that with therapy and speech therapy that he would be able to regain some of his function and a better quality of life.
Now, when this happened, you had mentioned, some of the nursing type homes, right? Mm-hmm. When he got out,
Yes.
Was he still married, and his children, were they still there and wanted to help care for him, or was it just too much for them?
He was actually going through a divorce when this happened. So, and both of his stepson and his biological son were in Alaska, and no, they didn't help. So he was down here being cared for primarily by my grandparents, and they were the ones doing everything, caring for him, brought him into the home after he received the final injuries that he would get in the VA nursing home in Vancouver.
So when it rains, it pours. He literally lost everything, if you will, even his family.
Yeah, it was awful. And I really, it did a lot of damage, I think, psychologically to his sons in Alaska, and they weren't just able to cope with the severity of his injuries or just the finality of it, because with this brain injury, there was no healing from it. There was no getting better. So he was essentially alive, but no longer the person he had been.
You know, I hear that a lot about family members and loved ones that they go through life-changing type incidents, and a lot of the times they don't know how to deal with it. They don't have any coping strategies, and a lot of the times they run. They don't, it's not because I don't think that they care.
No.
It's because I think it completely stresses them out to even think about it, and they don't know what to do. And that's why a lot of people in my instance say that my wife is an absolute angel for standing by my side for the years that I have spent. When I was in a chair going through some egregious VA medical malpractice on my own, that she was there every waking moment, every waking minute, emptying my pee bucket, delivering me my pills every 4 to 6 hours, my meals, and everything as I lay literally incapacitated in the chair. I had my children there that they never left my side. But again, I'm a very lucky man, because there's a lot of people out there that they get neglected and they get literally put into these homes where things just fall apart and they have nothing really left to live for. And then that's when that you start to become this prisoner of war in your own head and in your own state of mind. And at that point, you lose the person, mentally, physically, emotionally, they just become detached. Would you say that happened to your uncle?
I would say that's probably one of the most disturbing parts of his injury, is that he is completely aware inside his head. He is aware of the most subtle humor. He's aware of, if you tease him or anything like that, he is a prisoner in his own body. And that, for me, because he's not able to communicate back to us very well, maybe some nods, maybe shaking his head a little bit, but that's it. And that's the worst part for me, is knowing he's just completely aware inside his brain of everything going on with him, but he is completely unable to move himself, feed himself, sit up, move his legs independently or anything like that. He is, for all intents and purposes, an infant lying in a bed at the age of 75. And it's heartbreaking. But the injury was not that bad when he first got the injury. The injury became worse because of the care or lack of care he got in the VA nursing home.
So would it be safe to say that you have been taking care of your uncle for 31 years now?
Well, I can't claim all that. No, my grandparents were definitely angels on earth. They are the ones that took care of him. They were there every day while he was in the VA in Seattle, which, like I said, is a 3-hour drive. They were at the nursing homes every day, watching over him and taking care of him. And then when the injuries became too significant that he was receiving in the VA nursing home, they made the choice to bring him home and cared for him 24 hours a day, 7 days a week, without a single break, not a single break the whole time, until my grandpa passed away at the age of 93 just a few years ago. So they well over 25, 30 years that they devoted. And I stepped in around 2009 to help them, just as, things, they were getting older and it was getting harder for them to do things. So we eventually started bringing caregivers in, and he does have 24/7 care now.
Mm-hmm. Well, you said your grandparents, they were getting older, and I mean, it's hard to take care of your own self, let alone somebody else as well. I mean, especially at that age.
Right. Right. And he can't do it. I mean, it's hard to even describe how, if you had a baby, everything that you would do for a baby is what we have to do for him. Moving him every 2 hours to make sure he doesn't get pressure sores, changing him, feeding him, changing his clothes, getting him into the shower. Everything is done for him, and he's not able to help in any way.
Now, before we get into the VA negligence that kind of led to this, I have a few questions for you to kind of set this up.
Okay.
Now, you are his sole provider right now, his caretaker, his fiduciary, and his legal guardian, correct?
We kind of have teamwork in my family. My mother, his sister, is his fiduciary. I am his legal guardian and power of attorney. And then my dad just kind of, he picks up anything else that needs to be done, because there's just so many hoops to jump through when dealing with someone who's under the VA's network of care. So it is definitely a team effort, but it also extends to my children. They've grown up, with this, and my husband helping in any way he can. So we have a whole army of people taking care of him, between us, our family, the home health nurses that we have for him, the caregivers. So it takes a lot of people to take care of one person.
What has this done to your family, to your children, to their psyche, to their emotional and mental health? What has it done for you? How has this impacted your family, seeing a loved one being just living a life of despair?
It's so sad. It really does color every day of our lives. There's not a day off. I think it's given my kids a lot more empathy, and they've really stepped up, and they go in and tease him and joke with him, and they're not afraid to jump in and help if he needs to be put into his wheelchair or anything like that. They've really stepped up, and I think it's made them more empathetic and caring people. I think it's been going on in our family for so long, we don't even realize how impactful it is anymore. But it really does. 24/7, you're on call if something happens with him, or he needs to get to a doctor, or, just watching everything that's happening with him, because there's a lot of things that can go wrong when someone is bedbound, and you really have to literally be on top of it 24/7. So every holiday, every weekend, it doesn't go away just because there's, it's Christmas or something like that. So it has had a tough impact on our family, I believe. And it was especially hard for my grandparents when they were alive, just to see their son like that. And I did say one time to my grandma, we could try to find him a really good nursing home. We could try to get him into a private care place that would take care of him. And she looked at me and she said, "What if it was Mitchell?" And that's my son. And I just said, "Okay, I will never ask again," because no one loves you like your family.
Mm-hmm.
No one cares for you like your loved ones. So I never brought it up again, and he's been home now for 30 years.
Wow.
Yeah.
So I want to get into the VA now.
Yeah.
After his accident and the road he took, that ultimately led him to the VA nursing home. Now, at what age did he enter the VA nursing home?
He must have been, I would say, 46, right around there. It wasn't terribly long after his accident.
I want you to describe to me the medical care and the treatment that he was receiving once he got to the VA nursing facility?
Okay. Once he got there, my grandparents, like I said, were there every single day. So they were watching. And for people who are in a system like that, it's very important to have someone who is watching and advocating for you, sometimes loudly, but definitely always watching. But what we noticed was he's unable to feed himself, and he would have a tray of food just set in front of him and they would leave. So he can't feed himself. The food would just sit there. So my grandparents would come in and see the food sitting there and feed him. He wasn't being shaved. He wasn't being kept very clean. We do know that he was left sometimes for 8 hours in his wheelchair in the hallway, unable to move or, cry out for help or anything. And we noticed he started declining, and we didn't, we were all new to this. We didn't know what was going on at the time. We just thought it was part of the brain injury, or it was part of the medical issues he was going through. And really the only issue he had was the brain injury, but he just started declining and being less communicative. He wasn't sitting up independently anymore. He wasn't responding like he did. He was just fading in front of our eyes, and we couldn't figure out why. So what had happened, we finally found out, was that he was being given double the dose of his seizure medicine for over 2 months. And that completely destroyed what was left of his brain and turned him into what he is now.
Is he basically a vegetable right now?
Yes. Yep. But he does understand every single thing we say to him. But yes, he's able to move his arms a little bit. He's able to maybe move his feet a little bit, but he is completely reliant on us for everything from turning him to medication to feeding him, bathing him, everything like that. He's unable to assist in any way.
How many years did this happen at the VA nursing facility when he was being overdosed on his medication?
He was actually only in the VA nursing home for, I want to say it was around 6 months, because the decline happened quickly once he got in there. And that was when we finally figured out he had been overdosed on his medication, which is a very, very tough medication anyway. You have to be very careful with it. But he had toxic levels of it in his system when they finally figured out what was going on. And the clincher for my grandparents was he had a softball size pressure wound on his tailbone that was almost down to the bone, from not being turned adequately and not being moved enough. So between the medication overdose and the pressure wound, they ended up making the very tough call to bring him home to care for him 24 hours a day themselves.
So he was left neglected, bed sores, boils, that probably turned into infections, overdose on medicine. He wasn't shaved. He wasn't being properly taken care of. He was malnourished, again, as if he was a prisoner in a VA nursing facility that they are sworn to protect and care for those patients. Now, you brought him home at 47. Would it be about 47?
I would say it was around 46, early 47, right around there is when they brought him home. So it would have been, I believe it's around 1994 when he was brought home.
So I've heard a lot of stories about VA nursing homes and the lack of empathy and care that is provided. They're not all bad. There are a lot of great people out there, folks. This isn't an anti-VA show. We're just talking truth and fact here about somebody who fell through the cracks, as I once did too. Again, I know a lot of VA nurses and doctors that their hearts are in the right places. Yes, but we also have a lot of issues.
Yes,
and I agree. That's what we're talking about right now, on how your uncle, an honorable man, who would end up falling through the cracks, that would end up adding more damage to an
Yes.
already damaged body, and it would essentially put the kill shot into him after all of these medication overdoses. Now, from the outside looking in, your grandparents, all the family members, how did you guys begin to connect the dots that he was actually being over medicated?
Well, my grandparents just started asking a lot of questions because the change was so dramatic. And it, like I said, it was just over a course of 2 months. So every day they'd go there and he was just slipping further and further. And for a while, it was just written off as being part of the brain injury or being part of his body breaking down from being bedridden, just because your body does go through a lot of changes when you're stuck in bed and you're no longer an active person. And so we didn't know enough then to really understand what was going on until my grandparents really raised a fuss and said, something is wrong. What is going on here? And they finally got blood tests run. And then they discovered the toxic levels of the dilantin in his system. So it was my grandparents being loud and advocating loudly for him and not taking no for an answer anymore because he had declined so rapidly.
So you would say that he was given a deadly cocktail for quite some time, that
2 months. Yep.
that further added to the destruction of his.
Yes. Yeah. Night and day. When you look at pictures of him right after the accident, initially, when he entered the first nursing home, the private nursing home, he was sitting up and he's smiling and he had visitors and we could interact with him a little bit better. The brain injury was there, but he was definitely, you could see him in there. You could see the person he is still in there. And then after this overdose, he was just slipping away right in front of our eyes, and he wasn't interacting. He wasn't smiling anymore. He wasn't, being able to hold himself up in the wheelchair anymore. So it was a drastic change.
During this time, were you guys ever made aware of your rights, the veteran rights? Was there any federal tort claims that were filed as a result of the malpractice and the negligence that happened?
No, we did not know a thing. And at that time, it was just our understanding was the VA was untouchable. And it was just one of those oops things, and there was no recourse for us. So yeah, it was very disheartening. And we were having a hard time even getting him a VA rating through the VA. They were fighting my grandparents for about 2 years they were trying to say it wasn't a service-connected injury. And it clearly was, but they fought for a long time. And this is what I will say. At the VA hospital in Portland, Oregon, a VA nurse finally pulled them aside after hearing all their struggles they were going through and hearing, how they weren't getting any kind of a rating for him. He wasn't getting the pay that he should have been getting. And this nurse pulled them aside and said, you need to contact your senator. And so my grandma did. She wrote a letter to Senator Mark Hatfield. And within 2 weeks after a 2-year fight, he had a 100% disability rating and all of his back pay that he was owed. So that was amazing.
What was his rating when he went into the VA nursing home?
He didn't have one. Not that I'm aware of. They were still fighting, trying to say it wasn't a service-related injury.
From the stroke that he had from the post-traumatic stress as soon as he got home.
Yes.
I mean,
they fought and fought and fought.
Yeah, suffering from the wounds of war. And folks, you got to understand here, back in the Vietnam era, we didn't know what post-traumatic stress was.
No.
It's now very
what have you. I don't even know what they called it.
Yeah, it was shell shock.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, that's exactly what they called it. I have helped several Vietnam veterans because I believe that generation is the most undervalued an underappreciated group of military veterans that we've ever had in our nation's in our nation's history.
I
They were
agree.
called to do a tough job.
Yes.
We lost a lot of good men and women.
Yes.
There was poisons involved, and there
Oh,
was a
yeah.
lot of heavy combat operations in jungles. And I can imagine the levels of stress, worry, fear, the jungle rot and everything else.
Yes.
The diseases, and then to get home to have eggs thrown on you and to call you baby killers.
Be
That's
spit on. Yes.
yeah,
That's horrifying.
obviously that adds insult to veritable injury, and,
Yep.
that's not fair to the service members that were drafted to go.
Exactly. And he
you
was
know,
drafted at 18. He didn't have a choice in the matter. So he did what he was called to do.
right. Well, and that's truly honorable. There's a lot of folks that like to dodge that.
Yeah. We're
Yeah.
awfully close to Canada. It could have been an option, but no, he didn't do that.
Sure. So all these issues that you've had with the VA, and then you bring him home.
Mm-hmm.
Did you guys ever continue on with VA medical care, or did you guys go to private insurance after he was sent home because of the level of and the severity of his injuries?
He is still under VA care. Technically, we do all the care, but we still have hoops that we have to jump through, audits every year, accounting for literally every penny of his money. It costs him thousands and thousands of dollars each year to perform the audit. We have to have an attorney. We have to have a CPA. We have a bookkeeper putting together this audit. They require us to carry all these different bonds for him to protect his money. So in essence, he's paying a lot of money to protect his money. And I do understand, because people can exploit people's money, and I do get it, but we jump through a lot of hoops every September to get his money audited, and they do home checks occasionally, but this sounds awful, but this is one of my primary personal beefs, is they seem to be more concerned with how his money is being spent than him as a person.
Or his care.
Yeah, that's the part that really bothers me. The last VA home care home health check they had, the person walked in and she said, "I need to speak to him privately." And I thought, well, he doesn't speak. So how do you not know this after he's been in your system for this long to not even know he's nonverbal? And I said, okay. And I let her go in the bedroom and try to talk to him. And she was in there for about 30 seconds and came back out, and then spent the next hour going over his financials. And then on the way out the door, as if that wasn't, and this is just my own personal peeves, I guess, but as she was walking out the door, she kind of pulled me aside and she said, he still gets all his VA money, even if he's in a VA nursing home. They keep trying to get us to put him back in a VA nursing home. And I said, he wouldn't be in the condition he's in if it weren't for the care he received in a VA nursing home. We don't care about his money. So that was really just kind of sickening to me that she would even bring that up. And I thought, yes, our lives would be easier. Yes, things would not be so difficult for us, but is it the right thing to do? I don't think he would survive 6 months if we put him back in a VA nursing home. We've seen what they've done. We're still dealing with the things they did. So,
well, I think he feels the love being with you and your family, and you put a man that doesn't have really much to hang on to anymore, except for the love that you give him and that you guys surround him with. If you were to put him in that nursing home, he would know that, and he would have nothing left to live for.
Yeah, I agree. He's safe. He's loved. He's cared for. He's in the home he grew up and his whole childhood in. He's given the best quality of life that we can possibly give him. He's got very simple needs. He likes to listen to music, and we have a big TV for him that he can watch. And he has a whole staff of women caring for him who love and adore him. So it's the best possible situation we can give him.
Why do you need to hire attorneys for your yearly audits to go over his money? Isn't that something that the VA should provide?
Oh gosh, I wouldn't want them to be any help they offer has not been helpful. So we have a private attorney that we pay to prepare the audit. It's extensive. It takes weeks, and it has to be submitted to our county courthouse and also to the VA by a specified day. And we have to have every bank statement stamped and dated, and every expenditure and every receipt. And I mean, literally down to the last penny for his care, everything that we spend.
Is that because you are his legal guardian, so you need to take care of him as if he is a child?
Yes, they require that of us to make sure that we're not misspending his money or stealing from him or what have you.
So, like, I'm just having a hard time understanding that. Do you receive any caretaker financial assistance from the state or from the VA to help with these costs?
He does get a monthly VA payment, and he also gets Social Security.
Mm-hmm.
So out of that, we pay for all of his caregivers. Everything that isn't covered by the VA comes out of that money, his food and, everything like clothing, everything like that. So, and thankfully my grandparents were very frugal with his money, because the amount going out monthly is more than is coming in.
I can only imagine what a VA nursing home looks like. I know folks who have dementia, and it's scary.
Yeah.
And and I know that your uncle doesn't, but where I'm getting at is this: private care facilities, the really nice ones, these cost a ton of money. I'm talking big business.
Yes.
But they'll take good care of you. I mean, they have movie night. And you're hanging out with all of these different senior citizens or whatever it may be that are all suffering the same fate as you. They're playing board games. They have like beauty salons in there. They have coffee shops. They have little restaurants. I mean, literally, it is like fancy. Club Med for for old people, right?
Yep.
And they go there and they enjoy their last days of their life with their friends, and their family members can come in and they can check them out like for a field trip, and you can bring them back, and they have their own room and they have their own TV and they can decorate and everything's great.
Right.
And then you have the nursing homes that are covered by Medicaid and Medicare.
Yeah.
That are absolute garbage.
Yeah. They are
trash. And I know this because my brother is he's a life insurance expert, and he's a Series 7 and Series 8. And so he's got clients that, need to go to care facilities. And this is something that a lot of people don't really begin to talk about until it happens.
Until it's here. Yes. And, until there's no other option.
Right. And unfortunately, a lot of those times, we don't know when those times are coming. So really, it's ignored until, until it's not, right? It's not a problem until it rears its ugly head. Yeah. And then you're like, oh my God, what do I do? This is our best
option. Yeah. And his level of care, even in the best care facility, I don't think they would be able to care for him because his needs are so extensive. He's literally turned every hour and a half to 2 hours because his skin is so fragile. Medication given, I believe it's about 8 times a day, bowel regimen, everything. There's so much involved with it. I don't know that they would have time to provide that level of care in a facility, even one of the better ones. It is a lot of care.
With everything that your uncle is experiencing right now, like you explained, it just sounds so egregious. What is his state of mind? Is he happy, or has he had enough?
He has days where he is happier, and you can tell, but he has a lot of days that are just not good, and you can see it in him. Sometimes he's much more aware than others, and those days are fun, and we tease him and we play around and get him laughing, and he loves watching Larry the Cable Guy. He'll just laugh and laugh. So but he is very aware of how bad it is, and it's heartbreaking. That's really, for me, I would almost wish that he were completely unconscious of how bad it is, rather than to deal with living in this bed 24 hours a day, and being completely aware of what's going on. We can tell if we bring a new caregiver on, he definitely doesn't warm up to them right away. And you can tell, even though he's nonverbal, I feel like he gets embarrassed about some of the things we have to do with him, but we have to do it. So he's not always cooperative.
What's the turnover like on caretakers?
It can be really hard to find good caregivers, especially we live in a very, very rural area. So we pay above the industry standard, and the VA is also not happy about that, but we don't care, because it's more important for us to have good quality people who want to stay, rather than the turnover, because the turnover is just so disruptive to a small team and to my uncle, and just bringing someone into your home that you can trust and trust with him when we're not there. He would never be able to tell us if someone was hurting him or doing anything wrong. So it's tough. And we are very fortunate. We have an amazing team right now, and I'm grateful for each one of them, and they feel more like family than they do employees. So it's really nice. I trust each and every one of them implicitly with him.
What's your day-to-day look like, Jean?
My day-to-day. Well, I work full-time taking care of him.
Mm-hmm.
Lots of phone calls, doctor appointments. Taking him to doctor appointments is hard. Really, one of the best outcomes of COVID is that I am able to do more video calls with the doctor, rather than loading him up in the wheelchair, loading him up in the van, driving him to the doctor. That's really tough on him, and he's not thrilled about it when we have to do that. So my mom is taking care of the payroll, and we're submitting timesheets and working on the audit, throughout the year, so we can be ready for it at the end of the year, because they don't give you a lot of time to get that in. It really just kind of, I think I'm not even aware of how much it just is part of every minute of every day of our lives. Literally every minute of the day. I always have to be accessible by phone in case something happens with him. There's always something going on with the attorney or the bookkeeper, or, there's just always something going on, or we have to buy groceries, or we have to, there's just a lot that goes into it.
Now, if I'm not mistaken, isn't there like 7 activities of daily living?
7 activities of daily. I'm not familiar with that.
Where the bathing, the feeding, the bathroom, to where you need to constantly you need to perform every single task of his daily living, because
right.
he can't do not one of those activities of daily living. How are you doing?
Thanks for asking. Sometimes it's overwhelming, because you're trying to have your own life outside of it, but you really can't ever walk away from it. And sometimes, it is tough, but what's the option? Throw him to the wolves and put him back into the VA nursing system and hope for the best. So it's a tough decision that all of us have made, but if I were him, I wouldn't want to be taken back there. So it's not entirely convenient for all of us, but we wouldn't have it any other way. He's family, and this is just, I think every family has their own road that they walk that's got something, bad in it, and this is ours. So.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I was right on the 7 activities a day living, because I was literally in an incapacitated state for quite some time as well. And, I remember what my wife had to do. And Yeah, 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 you talk about embarrassing. Yeah, I mean,
I
it'll humble you
understand.
very, very quickly. But again, I had
Yeah.
angels. I had angels looking over me, and so I sincerely appreciate what you're doing, because there's a lot of people that can't handle it because it's too stressful, it's too emotional.
Yeah, it
People
is. Yeah.
people get so emotionally attached, and it almost stresses you out, and it increases your heart rate and those palpitations seeing somebody you love hurting. And
Right.
a lot of people can't surround themselves with that type of emotion because it hurts them, not only emotionally and not only mentally, but physically. It'll make you sick.
Yeah.
And
We always joke he's healthier than we are. He's got
yeah,
perfect blood pressure. He's got no wrinkles. He's so
because he knows you guys are doing fine. He's got nothing to worry about, right? But it's you
barely
guys
has
are
gray hair.
you, you have to manage your own life
Yeah.
and his.
Yes.
But his is very hard to watch. And it's
Yeah.
not easy wiping someone's butt,
No.
for
Not
bathing,
something I
right?
ever thought I would be doing in my life. That was not my
Yeah.
background is in accounting, not in that. So
Right, but it's something that needs to be done. You got the bathing, you got
yeah.
dressing him, you got getting
Mhm.
him in and out of bed, right? The
Yeah.
transfers,
Yep.
going to the bathroom, like I said, and eating. You have to
Yeah.
feed him,
Yep.
and those are all activities of daily
Yep.
living, and he can't check one of those boxes.
No.
You have to check every single one of those boxes, and it's your full legal responsibility to
Yes.
ensure his safety, and that he is receiving the quality of life that he deserves, and
Right.
that he is deemed to him, right,
Yeah.
as a human being.
Yeah. And that's legally required. There are
Right.
ramifications if I'm not doing my job properly and he's not being cared for properly, we can be reported to Adult Protective Services or to the
Mhm.
VAs. I mean, we don't ever give them a reason to do that. He is babied. We
Mhm.
have a very regimented, detailed day in, day out, you know, down to the minute, down when he gets his medication. Everything is completely dialed in. We've got a good system, but yeah, it is a lot of pressure. I worry about, and so I'm pretty meticulous about who I hire and making sure he's turned appropriately, making because his skin can break down quickly. And so
Mhm.
yeah, it's a lot. It's worth it, but it's a lot.
That's a lot to unload, for somebody like you. And I know you're a very busy person. You're a veteran advocate. You are a former city council
Yeah. Yeah.
woman in your town in
Yeah.
Oregon. And, that's a great responsibility.
That
Um,
was fun.
Explain some more of what else are you getting into?
I have a problem over volunteering, and I have friends who get me into these things. So right now, in Oregon, two of my friends and I are the chief petitioners to get an initiative on the ballot in 2024 to allow constitutional carry in the state of Oregon or permitless concealed carry. So my one friend, he's actually a Kiowa warrior pilot veteran, and he's the Marion County Republican chair, Joel Pulowski. And then my friend Carrie McQuiston was the mayor of Baker City, Oregon, and she also ran for governor in 2022 in Oregon. And she's now the executive director of Republicans Overseas. So the three of us have gone in and filed this petition, and we're now in the process of gathering signatures. We're getting our first 1,000 signatures now. We have a lot of constitutional sheriffs who are stepping up in our states in full support of this. And then once we get the 1,000 signatures, after that, we'll be getting about 200,000 signatures before July 5th of 2024, so we can get this on the ballot and vote on it. And this would, if Nebraska and Florida don't beat us to it, it would make us the 26th state in the nation to allow permitless concealed carry. But I think they're a little further on in the process, so they might beat us to it.
How do you find the energy to be a full-time caretaker and then go out and still perform your volunteer duties out in your community and your paying job?
I don't know. I really don't know. I think I just keep busy. So it's important to me, and this is something that I'm passionate about. So it doesn't feel like work to be doing this petition right now. And we've been doing the care of my uncle for so long. Like I said, we've got a very dialed in system, and we just make it all work. And I've got people I can fall back on and I trust, and somehow we just make it work, because I don't believe in just sitting around and complaining about something. If you want something changed, you got to step up and do something about it. And we definitely need some change in Oregon. And we've got a pretty black eye in the nation right now with all the craziness that goes on in our state. But we're representing the population that is not Portland, the farmers, the ranchers, the miners, the fishermen, all the people out in rural Oregon who are good, hardworking people. And we feel that this would benefit everyone in our state and make our state safer place, because what they've found in all the states that have constitutional carry is their crime rates go down, their mass shooting rates go down, home invasions go down. So we feel it's important.
Well, you are a selfless servant doing, the job that many people would shy away from and would definitely jump in a truck and drive as far as they possibly could.
Well, there's
away.
moments.
I'm
no saint.
Don't run away to where you say missing from Oregon. It's like, oh, I ran away for a minute.
I've made that threat to my husband a few times. I'm like, I'm just going to get in the car and drive.
So you were in a grocery store. You were in a grocery store not long ago.
Nope, a couple years ago.
You're putting your groceries on the belt there, and you look up, and what do you see?
I turned around, and right behind me was a picture of my uncle looking right at me from the cover of the Vietnam edition of Newsweek. It was just there in the magazine rack, and he was just eye level with me, and I screamed and raised a ruckus, and yeah, I didn't handle it well, but I was just so shocked to see this picture of him that we've had in the house for so long. It was a recon team he was with in Vietnam, and there it was right on the front of the Newsweek magazine. And it had been on the American Legion cover once several years back, maybe 10 years or so ago, but it was definitely a shock to turn around and see that. So I bought every copy.
So here you were getting some groceries, just a regular day. You've been caring for your uncle for such a long time, and you look up and you see your uncle being honored nationally in a picture that he took with all of his fellow soldiers from Vietnam. A picture that it looks like from 1968 or 1969, and there's a picture of him. How'd that make you feel when you saw that?
Oh, it was exciting. And thankfully my grandparents were still alive back then. So I could, like I said, I bought every copy and gave one to my parents and gave a couple to my grandparents. And it's sitting on the mantle at their house still. And we've got pictures of it framed and everything like that. And a picture of my uncle holding the magazine. We were showing it and teasing him that he's a supermodel. And but it was really pretty cool to see that, because in every Vietnam show I watch, with clips of people in Vietnam, I'm always looking for him and looking to see if I could see him anywhere. And I've never been able to see him, but that was really cool to see that.
Your uncle at a very young age was drafted for Vietnam. He went over there and he served honorably, and he served in heavy combat operations, and he sacrificed everything with his service to this nation. And do you feel as if you've come full circle now that he served and he sacrificed, and all these years later, you see a picture of him on Newsweek, and you're saying, I am now serving him, and I am now sacrificing my life for the betterment of somebody that gave everything for our country.
Right. I love it. And you know, we're a family of veterans. My grandpa was a veteran from World War II. My husband's a veteran. My son is active duty Air Force right now. My dad was in the Air Force. So it runs deep in our family, and it is an honor to take care of him and be able to provide the care, even when it's hard. I wouldn't have it any other way, because he didn't ask for any of this. And we've said, you know, he's still fighting the Vietnam War every day. He never gets to come home for it. He's still living it. So I'm glad you let me tell his story, because not many people do know it. And it makes people very uncomfortable often to hear it.
Well, you know, you're a champion, you know, and like I say, everybody has a story, and we all deserve to be heard. And the mission and the goal of this podcast is to bring out that value, right? And a lot of value was really added here today to a lot of people that may be going through similar circumstances with loved ones, with their care, having their life change, having to perform all of those activities of daily living for their loved ones, seeing them in the worst possible way that, again, will change your life forever. Right. And it really puts things into perspective it very, very quickly on how good we got it, right? When you're living in a healthy body and everything's going right. But every single day in this country, people have issues, and they go through the worst days of their life. And, you know, and it's how we deal with it. It's how we pick those pieces up and persevere and are surrounded by the loved ones, you know, that keep everything together. You are the glue here. You are the cohesion on what, you know, on what's keeping everything together. And with that, Jane, look, this has been a great interview, and I sincerely appreciate everything you have done and continue to do in the veteran community. I know you have a very strong voice in your state, and your service and your sacrifice and your dedication to not only our country, but to your uncle is sincerely honorable.
Thank you. I really appreciate you having me on here and allowing me to tell his story, because I don't think a lot of people know. And if it helps other people out there, other families who are going through something like this, feel a little less alone, because you do feel alone. Like, sometimes you just think, is anyone else going through this? And I know there are a lot of people going through the same thing. So you're not in it by yourself. We understand.
Well, there you go, folks. You are not alone. And always remember that you are not alone. Folks, remember to stay inspired, stay encouraged, stay motivated, and always stay in the fight. Until next time, for Today with Tally, this is Brian Tally. Good night. Semper Fi.